My name is Alex Dolphin, and today we're going to discuss ex post and ex ante. These are two judicial philosophies, and today we're going to discuss the differences between the two and how they might impact a hypothetical scenario. So let's start with ex post. Ex post is Latin for from a thing done afterward. Ex post philosophy is focused on the consequences for the parties at the bar. So, how will our judicial ruling impact the parties that are before us? They are focused on doing justice for the parties at hand, the parties that are before the court in this instance. There's a focus on justice for those parties. This approach is more flexible for judges because if judges are focused on doing justice for the parties at hand, then they might be more willing to surmount institutional obstacles to doing that because, our role as a judge is to do justice. And if that means sometimes we're not a faithful agent of the legislature, if that means sometimes we read a statute in a way that doesn't make the most sense, that's okay because we are doing justice for the parties at hand. And in that sense, it is also more pragmatic. It's pragmatic because it allows the judiciary to be more flexible, and there's less of a chance that their rulings are going to lead to absurd results. And finally, it bolsters the power of the judiciary. It bolsters the power because it gives the judges more flexibility to do justice for the parties at hand. So now let's move to ex ante. Ex ante is Latin for before the event. So the ex ante judicial philosophy is also focused on consequences of the ruling. They're certainly focused on the consequences, but they are focused on the future consequences. Ex ante philosophy says that any ruling is really like you're setting policy for society. You're setting policy. And so when you're thinking about how you're going to craft your rule, you need to think about what incentives that's going to create in the future. How will society as a whole respond to this rule? So there's less of a focus on the parties at the bar and doing justice for the parties at the bar. And there's more of a focus on the incentives that we're making when we create this rule. And we are enacting policy as the judiciary, and we need to be careful that when we do so, we are creating good incentives for the future. So the ex ante approach is, more focused on the future parties, whereas the ex post perspective is more focused on the parties before the court. And so in that sense, there's a vast difference between the two. All right, so now that we understand both of the philosophies, let's go ahead and jump into a hypothetical scenario where we could apply the ex post perspective and the ex ante perspective and see how both philosophies might lead us to different outcomes. Okay, so Congress passed this statute. It is 18 U.S.C. HYPO. And what it says is it shall be illegal for any U.S. citizen to pay any foreign party that has kidnapped a U.S. citizen in exchange for the return of the kidnapped person. This is a pretty basic ransom pay statute saying, hey, if you're a U.S. citizen and a foreign national is kidnapped, someone, you can't pay that foreign national ransom to get that kidnapped person returned. Okay, so here's our fact scenario. Liam has a 12-year-old daughter that was kidnapped by Russian gangsters while she was on a summer exchange program in Croatia. The gangsters called Liam, and they're demanding $50,000 for the safe return of his daughter. Liam pays the gangsters, and his daughter is returned. So his daughter is returned. She comes back. It seems like a happy and joyous moment. But then Liam is sad because the U.S. attorney charges him with violating 18 U.S.C. hypo. Okay, so how should the judge rule? So let's first start with the ex ante perspective. So how would an ex ante judicial philosophy handle this problem? Well, the statute's pretty clear. And it's pretty clear that Liam's activity falls within the statute. It is illegal. It's barred by the statute. Now, we also are going to think, well, maybe we could read some ambiguity in this statute if we wanted to, but let's think about the rule that we're crafting here. What is the rule that we're crafting here? And what was Congress trying to do when it crafted this rule? Well, looks like Congress was trying to say, hey, we don't want U.S. citizens to pay foreign parties that kidnap people ransom, right? Because if they do, the result of that, and this is important, the result of that would be that more and more foreign people would kidnap U.S. citizens while they're on vacation because these foreign gangsters, if you will, would know that U.S. citizens would pay that ransom to get their kidnapped people back in the country. Okay, so the judge here, if he's taking the ex ante perspective, he might very well come down hard on Liam. Now, why would he do that? Well, there's going to be a big incentive that he creates. if the ex-ante judge lets Liam slip through the cracks, well, then future U.S. citizens that have, family members that are kidnapped by foreign nationals are going to say, well, hey, I can pay this ransom. It's fine. The judges are usually pretty flexible on this. I'm just going to pay this ransom because I want my kidnapped person back. And you could see how that would lead to a slippery slope wherein more and more U.S. citizens are kidnapped because the gangsters, the kidnappers, know that U.S. citizens are going to pay ransom. And so the ex-ante perspective is saying, hey, we're crafting a rule for the future. It would be better off if less people paid foreign terrorists or foreign kidnappers ransom for the return of those kidnapped people, because then we'll probably have less kidnappings overall, right? Because people respond to economic incentives, and if these gangsters never get ransom pay, well then what's the point of kidnapping these people in the first place? Okay, so that's the ex-ante perspective. You can see that it's looking forward, it's looking to the future, and how the judiciary's ruling would craft a policy, and they're thinking about the societal consequences of that. Okay, so the ex-post approach. Well, our heartstrings kind of tug for Liam here, right? He had a 12-year-old daughter. She was kidnapped while she was on vacation. I mean, what are you going to do? You're a father. And this seems like the right thing to do, is to pay these gangsters so your daughter survives, so you can get your daughter back in the United States. And so the ex-post judge might feel like, well, this isn't really a just outcome if Liam is charged with this statute. Congress passed this law, but hey, this law is not really just, because this person was just trying to get his 12-year-old kid back. And if we enforce this, we're going to be doing injustice here. So how might the ex-post judge get around that? Well, he might say, well, the purpose of this statute was to stop U.S. citizens from paying terrorists. But here it was just Russian gangsters. These weren't terrorists. These were just a couple of rogue Russian gangsters. And so, although the letter of the statute might capture this, the spirit of the statute does not. And so we're going to be more flexible. We're going to be more pragmatic. We're going to let Liam off here. He's not guilty of violating this. Even though the statute looks pretty clear and it looks like, hey, definitely Liam violated this, the ex-post judge might try and find a way, a tool in his toolbox, or in her toolbox, to try and get around this unjust scenario and try and make sure that Liam doesn't go to jail here. So that's a hypothetical. I hope that helped to illuminate the difference between the two judicial philosophies. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video and you'd like to see more, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye-bye.